Hey folks, it's Andrew from Gemba Red, and by popular demand, we're going to be taking a look at two different LED masks. We've got an Amazon mask on the left that's about $169, and we've got the Omnilux Contour that's about $395. So the short answer is yes, the Amazon mask can produce about 25 milliwatts per centimeter squared at the maximum setting. It does have three settings, which is nice. The lowest setting is about 15 milliwatts per centimeter squared, so that might be nice if you want to avoid too much heating, and it's got all the proper wavelengths. It's got some 605, it's got some 630, it's got some 660, and some 850. So I'd say on a technical basis, the Amazon one would work very well. Now the Omnilux only has one setting, which I measure a maximum of about 35 milliwatts per centimeter squared, and they deliver two of the most effective wavelengths, or clinically studied wavelengths, for skincare at around 630 and 830. So they focus a little bit more on, their clinically studied wavelengths. And the higher maximum intensity sounds a little bit nicer. Maybe you can do slightly shorter treatments or do it less frequently. So that's a little bit of an advantage. It produces more heat, so it warms up a little bit more. So you can see, I'll put up on the screen my infrared camera, and you can see the one on the left with the lowest setting is producing a lot less heat than the Omnilux. So if you're concerned about heat, some people might be sensitive to hyperpigmentation or be concerned about facial fat loss that can be caused by the heat. Maybe you want lower intensity. So it's actually an advantage the Amazon one has, is that you get lower intensity settings, and that might be a good idea. Or again, you might need to do the Omnilux at shorter doses than what the timer gives you. Otherwise, I can't really comment on the longevity of how long each one of these will last. This one's got the battery that's kind of built in on the top here, so it looks like it would be hard to replace if the battery fails, where the Omnilux has the battery kind of modular that, if the battery dies, they can just send you a new battery. I don't know how their business works, but this is a good idea to have the battery separate and replaceable, and this looks like the battery's kind of integrated and harder to replace. Also, the Amazon one came with this sticky film on it to kind of as like a dust protector, but it's this adhesive film, which is kind of nasty, that you would put your face on. So just wipe it down with like kind of a damp cloth, which maybe a little bit of dish detergent, and then wipe it dry and let it dry out before you use it. I can't really smell right now because I just had nasal surgery, but there was a little bit of an odor from the new Amazon one. And, that's something I can't really tell you of the quality of the silicone. Different grades of silicone can have more or less impurities, and that could be problematic. So, again, we like to assume the more expensive brands are choosing the higher quality silicone, but we don't know. And remember, with masks, most of them are battery powered, which is a DC power source, so you don't need to worry about things like flicker or EMFs because it's a DC power source. So you get a very stable current to the LED, so there's not going to be any modulation of the, that would cause flicker, or the AC modulation is what causes the EMFs that we don't want. So you would only be concerned about EMFs if it was plugged into the wall. Or some companies are adding fans or some fancy electronics, and then you might want to check the EMFs. I did check the EMFs. I'll put the pictures on the screens just to be completely thorough, but I already knew they were going to be super duper low. It's basically just measuring the EMFs in the room. They're not actually adding to the EMFs in the room because it's just DC power. So since we're talking about masks, it's good to contrast it to a panel, where a lot of panels you can use non-contact. You'll use it at a distance away. Again, you probably only want, anywhere from 10 to 35 milliwatts per centimeter squared at the correct distance away from the panel. And sometimes the panels are nice because, again, you're not getting any skin contact, so you won't get any heat transfer from, the mask or the device to the face. So again, if you're concerned about too much heat, you might want a non-contact panel instead. And an interesting contrast between panels is that you kind of get more of a homogeneous wall of light, as long as you're at the right distance away and you don't have too narrow beam angles and hotspots and stuff, you get kind of more of a uniform wall of light from a panel, where a lot of the LED masks, you've got all these LEDs, but they might be spaced a half inch, an inch apart. And so in between each LED is kind of a void space where you're not getting any intensity. So when I take a measurement right in between two of the LEDs on the mask, I get 0 intensity. So it's kind of a misnomer that you get, okay, you get 35 here, but in between you get 0, and then you get 35 again, and then 0, and then 35. So, you kind of have that spacing, which is fine because that's the way it works a lot with lasers. You get discrete points, but it's an interesting difference, and, we don't really know what's better or worse. And we do know we get a lot of bystander effects and systemic effects, so you can, treat discrete points, but you're still getting benefits to the adjacent cells. And that's why I was talking to Vanessa, who runs the Goals to Get Glowing blog. She actually sent me these masks, and, we were talking about there's no LEDs over your kind of lip line here, but again, that's probably fine. You're getting enough total energy to get the systemic effects that you could still be getting some benefits in this area because of the bystander effects and systemic effects. You don't always have to directly treat over certain areas. But again, that's kind of a pro and con of using a panel that can kind of cover more area and more homogeneously versus a mask that is a little bit more discrete points. And a better way to quantify these masks in the future is to put the whole thing inside of an integrating sphere, get the total watts output, and then divide that by the area so you get the average intensity. And you also want to know the total joules from these masks, because total joules is an important way to quantify your dose and not just joules per centimeter squared. So, we get, it's very complicated to try to reconcile the differences because there's a lot of small differences in how they're dosed and how much total joules you're getting from one or the other. And, those are things that we need a lot more education on. We need proper measurements, and, we need to be thinking more about. So anyway, if you have any questions about skincare and masks, you can go to the Goals to Get Glowing blog, and Vanessa has a really good blog of all the different major brands and manufacturers and options on the market. She asked them for their intensity info, wavelength info, and, tried to get as accurate of info that she can. And, she's got a great summary of the science, especially as it pertains to skincare. And so I always refer people to that blog if they ask me about masks. And, hopefully this helps share my kind of perspective on masks. Anyway, thanks for tuning in.